The wind off the ocean was sharp that morning, biting through the crisp blue of the naval base like a warning. The flag rose with a violent snap, its fabric trembling as though it, too, sensed what was about to unfold. Rows of sailors stood on the parade ground, boots aligned, eyes fixed forward. Except one. He was laughing. Petty Officer Ryan Cade. Broad-shouldered, sunburned, the kind of man who believed the world bent for his confidence. Leaned slightly out of formation, whispering something to the man beside him. A ripple of suppressed chuckles followed. The reason? The woman walking toward them. Lieutenant Commander Ava Brooks, moved with the measured precision of someone who'd spent half her life on discipline. Her uniform looked like it had been cut from the wind itself. Sharp, clean, untouchable. But to Cade, it was a setup for a joke. "Bet she doesn't even know how to hold a rifle," he muttered under his breath. Then louder, just enough for his buddies to hear, "Hey, Mom, what's your rank again? Can't tell from here." The words cracked the air like a whip. It wasn't a question. It was mockery, wrapped in a grin, the kind of grin that said you don't belong here. Ava stopped mid-step. The yard fell silent, as though even the wind refused to carry the insult further. Her gaze met his steady, cold, and heartbreakingly calm. Not a word. No anger, no retaliation, just silence. That silence hit harder than any reprimand could have. For a moment the man's grin faltered. Around them the other SEALs straightened, eyes darting between the two. They'd all seen this kind of thing before. New officers who tried to command respect by shouting. But Ava didn't shout. She just looked at him as though measuring the weight of something only she could see. Then she turned away. The decision was simple, almost surgical. She addressed the squad without acknowledging him. Her voice, steady, even, carried across the yard. Today's training starts in the obstacle yard. Double gear, no shortcuts. Her tone didn't invite questions. She walked off, boots striking the ground in perfect rhythm. But inside, behind the discipline, something heavy stirred. It wasn't humiliation. It was memory. She'd fought this before. At Annapolis, at Coronado, in every room where men tested her resolve with smiles instead of honesty. But the difference was, she didn't fight for validation anymore. She fought for silence, for the moment when they'd realize their underestimation had consequences. Later that day, the obstacle yard was chaos. The sun beat down like an interrogation light, blinding and merciless. Mud churned under boots, sweat burned through uniforms, and in the middle of it, Ava, not barking orders, not hiding behind rank, but running the same course as her men. She scaled the wall first, tore through the rope net, dropped into the trench without hesitation. The men followed, slower, grunting. Cade's smirk was gone now, replaced by disbelief as she outpaced him again and again. And again. She wasn't supposed to. She was smaller, lighter, but somehow she moved like she'd been born for this exact terrain. By the end of the hour, she stood at the finish line, mud-streaked and breathing hard, watching them drag themselves in, one by one. When Cade stumbled across the line, she didn't say a word, just nodded. "Hydrate, 10 minutes, then we go again." He stared at her, chest heaving, shame burning hotter than the sun. Around him, even the most cynical SEAL kept their eyes down. The unspoken rule of the base had shifted. But the moment of reckoning hadn't come yet. It would come later, when word of his remark reached the captain. Because men like Captain Elijah Ward didn't tolerate disrespect, not when it poisoned the heart of his command. And when he called for Cade that evening, the entire base would hear what silence truly sounded like. As Ava stood near the docks, watching the reflection of the setting sun on the waves, she felt the day's weight settle in her bones. She didn't need revenge. She didn't need to prove anything. All she needed was the quiet certainty that truth had already begun its work. And somewhere behind her, in an office lit by a single lamp, a captain was about to make that truth echo across the base. The captain's office overlooked the parade ground, where the last hints of daylight still glimmered on the steel rails, and the quiet hum of evening routines began. Captain Elijah Ward stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back, jaw tight with a patience that was more dangerous than anger. He had seen 1,000 acts of arrogance, But this one, the kind that targeted someone's worth, not their work, cut deeper than insubordination. It was corrosion. The door opened. Petty Officer Ryan Cade entered with the forced stiffness of a man trying to hide nerves. The air in the room was cold, though no air conditioner was running, just the kind of cold that came from something larger, a moral chill. "Sir," Cade said, snapping to attention. Ward didn't turn around. At ease, the two words came out measured but heavy. "Do you know why you're here, Petty Officer?" "No, sir," Cade lied, his tone rigid. Ward turned then, his eyes sharp as glass. "You mocked a superior officer in front of your team, Lieutenant Commander Brooks." Cade hesitated, a flicker of unease crossing his face. "Just a joke, sir. We were just—" The captain cut him off, his voice low. "Jokes reveal more truth than reports do." He stepped closer, his boots echoing against the wooden floor. "And what you revealed today was rot." The words landed with precision, not shouted, just deliberate, like bullets placed one by one. Ward gestured to the window, toward the darkening yard. "Do you see that ground out there? Men have bled into it. Some never came back from where we trained them to go. Respect isn't a courtesy here, it's oxygen. And you just tried to choke someone with it." Cade swallowed hard. Silence filled the space, heavy and absolute. "Sir, I didn't mean—" "You meant it," Ward interrupted, quieter now. But the quiet was worse. "You meant every syllable. You thought it was funny because she's not what you expect a SEAL officer to be. You thought her presence was a gift you were free to laugh at. But let me remind you, she's not here because anyone allowed her. She's here because she earned it while you were still figuring out how to lace your boots." Cade's eyes lowered, his chest tightened, breath shallow. Ward didn't stop. "Do you know what she did during her deployment in Fallujah?" He waited a beat. "She carried 2 wounded men through live fire. After her commanding officer went down, she took command, got her team out, and then refused medevac until every one of them was accounted for. That's her record. That's her rank. That's the woman you thought was a punchline." Every word sliced through Cade's defenses, leaving him hollow. But Ward wasn't done. He turned toward the intercom on his desk, pressed a single button, and spoke. "All personnel to the parade ground. Formation in 5. Cade's heart froze. He knew what was coming. Minutes later, the base gathered under the yellow light of the setting sun. The flag hung still. The air was thick with curiosity and unease. Ava stood at the far end, unaware at first of what was unfolding. Her hair was still damp from the showers, uniform crisp again. When she saw Ward and Cade approaching, her expression didn't change. Calm, reserved, almost detached. Ward walked to the front, his voice carrying over the assembled ranks. "This base runs on respect," he began. "Without it, we're not warriors. We're chaos in uniform." He turned to Cade. "Petty Officer, step forward." Cade obeyed, his throat tight, his entire body locked in tension. "This man," Ward continued, "forgot that respect doesn't bend to gender, age, or appearance. It bends only to character. And today that character belonged not to him, but to the officer he mocked." The silence that followed was suffocating. No one shifted. No one breathed too loud. Ward's gaze moved slowly across the formation. "You may think strength looks a certain way. That command comes from the loudest voice or the biggest shadow. But you're wrong. Sometimes it stands quietly, lets the mockery fall, and then proves itself in the dirt without a single complaint." He looked back at Ava. Lieutenant Commander Brooks stepped forward. She did, eyes steady, chin lifted. Not in defiance, but in composure. Ward's tone softened slightly. "You reminded this command today what discipline truly looks like. And you did it without anger, without shouting. For that you have my respect, and the respect of every man and woman on this ground." He turned to the others. "If you ever forget what leadership means, remember this moment." The base was utterly silent, the kind of silence that feels earned. Cade stood there, unable to meet her eyes. Ava didn't gloat, didn't smile. She simply nodded once. Acknowledgement, not triumph. Ward dismissed the formation, and the crowd slowly dispersed, murmuring softly. But something deep had changed. As Cade lingered, still shaken, Ava passed him quietly. For a heartbeat, he thought she'd ignore him completely. But then, softly, just loud enough for him alone, she said, "Respect isn't given, petty officer, it's revealed." And then she was gone, her footsteps fading into the night as the base lights flickered on, one by one. The silence left behind wasn't empty. It was filled with something unspoken, the kind of silence that teaches, the kind that lasts. That night, the base was unusually quiet. The mess hall, usually filled with laughter and the sound of clinking trays, carried only hushed whispers and cautious glances. Even the air felt heavier, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath after what had happened. Word of the captain's public reprimand spread fast, faster than any wildfire of gossip. But unlike most rumors, this one carried a weight of respect rather than mockery. Lieutenant Commander Ava Brooks sat alone near the window, her untouched coffee cooling beside her. Outside, the waves broke against the docks, a low rhythmic sound that always steadied her thoughts. She wasn't one to seek validation, but tonight, the silence after the storm left her thinking. Not about victory, but about the loneliness of being right. She could still feel the burn of that morning's sun on her skin, still smell the mix of sweat and earth from the obstacle yard. She had run harder than anyone else, not because she wanted to prove a point, but because she had to remind herself that endurance wasn't only about muscle. It was about the heart that refuses to yield when dignity is tested. She remembered something her father once said before he deployed for the last time. "People will respect your silence more than your defense if you stand your ground." He'd never come home, but his words did. They followed her through the academy, through the grueling years of training where every stare was a question and every handshake a test. Across the hall, a few officers spoke in low voices. They weren't mocking her anymore. Their tone had shifted to something cautious, almost reverent. Respect, once forced, now came naturally. But she didn't bask in it. Respect gained through humiliation wasn't the goal, it was a correction. What mattered was that the base had seen what leadership looked like when it didn't need to roar. The door creaked open behind her. Footsteps measured, deliberate. She didn't turn. "Captain," she said quietly, sensing his presence before hearing his voice. Ward stepped closer, hands clasped behind him. "You handled yourself well today, Commander." "I handled myself," she replied, eyes still fixed on the window. "You handled the rest." He studied her reflection in the glass. "Sometimes leadership means letting others see the truth for themselves." "You didn't need me to defend you," she smiled faintly. "No, sir, but the base did." For a moment, neither spoke. The sound of the waves filled the room like a slow heartbeat. Ward finally broke the silence. "You know, I've been in command long enough to recognize something rare. You don't just follow orders. You make people remember them." Ava turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "Respect is a fragile thing, Captain. Sometimes it's not lost, it's tested. Today was just another test." Ward nodded. "Then you passed it, and so did this command." He hesitated, then added, "For what it's worth, Brooks, I'm proud to have you here." The words landed softly, but meant more than any medal could. She gave a quiet nod, then stood, her posture effortlessly precise. "Permission to retire for the night, sir." "Granted." As she walked away, Ward watched her go with a strange mixture of pride and guilt. He knew the world wasn't yet fair, not even within the disciplined walls of the military. But he also knew that people like Ava Brooks were changing it, one quiet act of defiance at a time. Later that night, as the base lights dimmed, a knock came at Ava's door. She hesitated before opening it. Standing there was Cade, his uniform pressed, posture rigid but eyes uncertain. "Lieutenant Commander," he said, voice low. "Ma'am, I owe you an apology." She studied him for a long moment. His words trembled, not from fear but sincerity. "I disrespected you," he continued. "And I didn't see it until until today. I thought I understood leadership. I didn't." Ava leaned slightly against the doorframe, arms crossed. "You don't owe me an apology, petty officer. You owe yourself understanding." He blinked, unsure how to respond. She went on, voice calm but piercing. "Respect isn't something you give to authority. It's something you give to those who've earned it, even when it challenges what you expect. If you learned that lesson, then today wasn't wasted. Cade nodded slowly. Yes, ma'am. She stepped aside, signaling that the conversation was over. But her tone softened as she added, Tomorrow, 600, training yard. I'll see you there. If you want to make this right, show it through effort. He straightened. Yes, ma'am. I will. When the door closed, Ava exhaled slowly. Redemption wasn't always loud. It was a quiet recalibration of the human heart. She didn't know if Cade would truly change, but she knew the moment had left a mark deeper than humiliation. It had planted something he'd have to live up to. The next morning, long before the sun rose, the base was already stirring. And at the training yard, the first one there, before even Ava was Cade, waiting, sweating, ready. And for the first time, when she arrived and nodded in acknowledgement, he didn't see a woman standing before him. He saw an officer. Dawn broke over the base in shades of grey and gold, the kind of light that seemed to hesitate before it fully arrived. The ocean was calm, the horizon pale and endless, yet the training yard was already alive with the sound of discipline, the dull thud of boots against earth, the breath of exertion, the clatter of metal on concrete. Lieutenant Commander Ava Brooks stood with her hands clasped behind her back, watching as her unit went through their drills. The morning air was cold enough to sting, but sweat already ran down the faces of the men before her. And at the center of them, Ryan Cade. He wasn't joking this time. His movements were clean, sharp, unflinching. There was no laughter, no swagger, only determination that bordered on repentance. Every step, every pull-up, every sprint seemed to carry a silent apology. Ava said nothing. She didn't praise him, didn't acknowledge his change in demeanor. Shoo. She simply watched. Because real transformation wasn't confirmed by words. It was revealed through consistency. The others noticed too. Something about the air around Cade had shifted. Where mockery once lingered, respect began to fill the empty space. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, like dust settling after a storm. Halfway through the drill, she gave a command that made them all pause. Pair up. The men hesitated for a fraction of a second, then obeyed. Ava walked down the line until she stopped in front of Cade. You're with me, she said simply. His eyes widened, but he nodded. Yes, ma'am. They took positions at the start of the endurance circuit, a brutal series of sprints, climbs, and body carries. It wasn't about speed, it was about endurance, resilience, trust. The whistle blew. Mud splashed. The world shrank to breath and motion. Cade pushed himself harder than he ever had before, the rhythm of his heartbeat syncing with the relentless pounding of his boots. Ava moved beside him, effortless in her precision. She wasn't competing. She was demonstrating. Every movement was a lesson in control, not dominance. When they reached the section that required carrying a partner, Cade froze. He'd trained with men heavier than her, but this was different. This was symbolic. He hesitated, unsure if offering to carry her would be taken as disrespect. Without breaking stride, she spoke between breaths. Don't think, just act. He obeyed, scooped her over his shoulder and moved, his muscles screaming, lungs burning. Halfway through, his pace faltered, and she said quietly, Good, feel the weight. That's leadership, it's never light. He didn't respond, only pushed harder. When they reached the end, she slipped down with practiced grace, landing steady on her boots. She nodded once. Now your turn. She crouched, gesturing for him to climb onto her back. He hesitated, but her expression didn't allow room for argument. When he finally did, expecting her to struggle, he was wrong. She carried him, steady, unbroken. Step after step, the sight froze the other seal in their tracks. The sound of boots over gravel, the steady rhythm of control. It wasn't defiance, it was demonstration. When she set him down, the entire yard was silent again. Not from shame this time, but awe. She spoke just loud enough for them all to hear. No one carries alone here. Not weight, not mistakes, not pride. Then she walked away, leaving the message to settle in their bones. Later that afternoon, as the sun stretched over the water, Captain Ward stood on the observation deck, arms crossed, watching the drills below. He'd seen hundreds of sessions like this, But something about this one was different. The energy was aligned, not forced. Commander Harris, his second-in-command, joined him quietly. "That's quite a shift down there," he murmured. Ward nodded. "That's what happens when leadership is earned in silence." She didn't break them. She built them. Harris watched Ava finish the session, calling out orders with quiet authority. "You think they'll follow her now?" Ward smiled faintly. "They already are." As the day faded, the base gathered near the docks for evening inspection. The wind had picked up, tugging at uniforms and flags alike. Ava stood before her squad, eyes steady, posture flawless. Ward approached, clipboard in hand. "Commander Brooks," he said formally, but his tone carried something gentler beneath it. "Your team's performance has improved by 30% since last quarter." Ava inclined her head. "They earned it, sir." Ward's gaze shifted to the squad behind her, then back. "No, Commander. They learned it. From you." He turned to address the entire group. "Every man and woman here should remember what you witnessed this week. Leadership isn't measured by how loud you can command. It's measured by how many rise when you lead by example." The wind howled briefly, almost in agreement. He paused, letting his next words sink in. And sometimes it takes the quiet strength of one to remind the rest what honor looks like. Cade stood a few rows back, eyes locked on Ava. His face no longer bore arrogance, only respect. Real, grounded, unshakable respect. Ward dismissed the formation, and as they dispersed, Ava caught sight of Cade helping another recruit with his gear, something he'd never done before. It was small but powerful. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself a quiet smile, not of pride, but of peace. The kind of peace that comes only after proving that dignity doesn't demand attention, it commands it. As she walked toward the shoreline, the sound of waves filled the air again. The same sound that had followed her through years of battles, external and internal alike. She looked out across the horizon and whispered to herself, "Respect isn't given. It's built, one day, one choice at a time." Behind her, the base lights flickered on, and for once, they didn't just illuminate the steel and stone of a military installation. They illuminated a change, quiet but lasting. That night, the sky above the base was endless, a sweep of indigo and salt air, pierced only by the slow rotation of the lighthouse beam cutting across the dark sea. It cast long silver lines over the docks, over the quiet buildings, over the woman who stood alone by the water, hands buried in her pockets. Lieutenant Commander Ava Brooks had seen many nights like this. Nights when the world around her seemed at peace, while her mind carried the noise of every test, every scar, every word she had chosen not to say. The waves whispered like voices she'd left behind. She didn't mind the quiet. She trusted it. Silence, she had learned, told the truth better than words ever could. Behind her, the hum of the base softened. Lights dimmed one by one as the last units turned in for the night, but not everyone slept easily. Inside the barracks, Ryan Cade lay awake, eyes fixed on the ceiling, the rhythm of his breath uneven. He replayed everything, the laughter, the shame, the look in her eyes when she didn't retaliate, but simply looked at him like he was already seen through. That silence had haunted him far more than the captain's reprimand. He rose quietly, pulling on his boots. Something compelled him to step outside, to walk beneath the same sky she had faced that morning. He found himself heading toward the docks, where a figure stood in the silver wash of moonlight. "Commander," he said softly. She didn't turn right away. "You're out late, petty officer." "Yes, ma'am," he replied. "Couldn't sleep." She finally faced him, her features calm, unreadable. Guilt doesn't let anyone sleep easily. He nodded slowly, stepping closer, his voice barely above the whisper of the wind. "I used to think strength meant talking louder than everyone else. But you—" He stopped, searching for the words. "You made me realize it's about who can stand in silence without needing approval." For the first time, her expression softened, not with sympathy but with understanding. "You learn something most don't in their entire career. Don't lose it." He hesitated. "Do you ever get tired of proving yourself?" Her eyes drifted toward the horizon. "Every day," she said quietly, "but I don't do it for them." I do it for the ones watching silently, waiting to see if they can be more than what the world expects. Cade followed her gaze, the moonlight reflecting on the waves, the endless stretch of ocean that mirrored everything they carried. I used to laugh at that kind of thing, he said. Now I just want to live up to it. Ava turned, studied him for a moment, then said, Then you already have. She walked away, her figure dissolving into the shadows between the barracks and the sea. Cade stood there long after she left, the sound of her words echoing louder than any drill sergeant's command. Weeks passed. The base returned to its rhythm, but the energy had changed, steady, focused, unified. There were no more murmured jokes when Ava walked by, no sideways glances. Her name carried weight now, not because she demanded it, but because she had defined it. One morning, a new recruit arrived, young, nervous, uncertain. She was small, quiet, and carried the same hesitant posture Ava once had years ago. Cade was assigned to train her. When she stumbled during drills, dropping her pack, laughter rippled through the line. Cade's voice cut through it immediately. Quiet, he barked. Pick it up and keep moving. But when the recruit looked at him with embarrassed eyes, Cade's tone changed. Don't rush. Strength isn't about speed. Strength isn't about speed. It's about not quitting. She nodded, breathless but grateful. When she rose and fell back into step, Cade caught sight of Ava standing at a distance, observing the training. Their eyes met briefly. She didn't speak, but the small nod she gave was enough. That evening, during briefing, Captain Ward addressed the team. Tomorrow, Commander Brooks will lead a joint operation with 2 Allied units, he announced. We'll be deploying at first light. The room straightened instantly. Ava's calm demeanor never wavered. She wasn't the kind of leader who fed on attention, but the quiet respect in the air now surrounded her like armor. When the meeting ended, Ward stopped her at the door. You've changed the tone of this place, Commander, he said. You didn't just command them, you taught them. She gave a small, steady smile. They taught themselves, sir. I only reminded them what they already knew. Ward chuckled softly. Maybe, but it takes a certain kind of leader to awaken that. He paused. You'll do well out there. The next morning, the sky was barely awake when the team assembled on the tarmac. The rotors of the helicopter thundered in rhythm with their hearts. Ava climbed aboard first, her eyes scanning the horizon with the same focus she always carried. Cade followed, seating himself opposite her. For a moment, they said nothing. Then, over the roar of the engines, he leaned forward slightly. Mom, she looked up. Thank you. She didn't reply, just gave that familiar, calm nod, the kind that said everything without needing sound. As the helicopter lifted off, the base below shrank to a cluster of lights framed by the dawn. The sea glimmered beneath them, endless and still. Inside the cabin, Cade closed his eyes, remembering the first day he saw her walk across that same parade ground. He had thought she didn't belong. Now he understood. She belonged more than anyone. The captain watched from the ground until they disappeared into the clouds. He exhaled deeply, a small smile tugging at his lips. The base was silent again, but not with tension this time. It was the silence of respect, earned and complete. And somewhere beyond the rising sun, Lieutenant Commander Ava Brooks carried that silence with her. The silence that had once been her burden, now her strength. Because true command didn't roar, it resonated. And that day, across every corner of that base, her name did exactly that.